What an extraordinary turn of events this is, Bruce. I'm looking forward to talking to the AFL Chief Executive about who knew what and why the AFL took so long to act on the Geelong Football Club. But we should start out by saying that the AFL Chairman and former Geelong Chairman, who was Chairman of Geelong when Jake Kolodjashnij was asked to, given the choice really, between continuing his career as an AFL player or signing a waiver which took away his legal rights to take action against the club in the event of another concussion. So Craig Drummond, we haven't heard from. We've been waiting to hear from him. There's a lot of stuff about, welfare being central and a complex and sensitive matter that, quite frankly, I'm sick of hearing from all the major players. What we've seen, though, is an apology from Craig Drummond. As the club has also acknowledged, there was a process failure, says the chairman, in relation to lodgement of the agreement with the AFL and the AFL Players Association. I have not and will not be involved in any deliberation in relation to this matter. So he's removed himself from the process of whether or not rules and regs were broken. And he says in finishing, I apologise for the mistakes made in this very complex situation. Now, Bruce, Craig Drummond can't just recuse himself from this investigation. He needs to stand down for now as AFL chairman. Andrew Newbold was forced to stand down as an AFL commissioner when he was implicated in the Hawthorn racism scandal. There is just no way that there is any tenable way that Craig Drummond, given that we don't know, we know he signed off on this waiver, which has now been condemned by the AFL Players Association and removed from all player contracts forevermore. We don't know whether Craig Drummond knew that Geelong had failed to lodge this agreement in contravention of AFL rules, is my understanding, to the AFL and the Players Association. We need to know that, but for now, Craig Drummond cannot serve as chairman of the AFL Commission.
Do you agree with Caro, Leigh? Should Craig Drummond stand down until this investigation is completed?
Well, all those what I would call tangents. I mean, the concussion cloud has hung over and is hanging over the sport, and this is like another chapter in a way. So you've got, were AFL rules broken, all that kind of stuff, and how do they get to the bottom of that? Yeah. And then you've got the ethical issue, which is partly about individual responsibility on one hand. Like, you should be responsible for yourself. But there's the employer-employee responsibility that sort of goes around in all this kind of stuff. And anyway, we'll work through all this, and we need to talk to Andrew Dillon shortly. But the ethical issue, the sort of the legal and the AFL rules breach, that'll be play out, and there'll be sanctions if rules have been breached. But the whole ethical issue of personal responsibility always stands the forefront of my thinking.
I think that's well said, Leigh. But getting back to consequences, we saw Steve Hocking finally speak out yesterday afternoon. He was strong in defence of his former chairman, which I thought was probably a bit gratuitous. But I'm afraid Steve Hocking too, and there have been precedents, could possibly also be forced to stand aside or be suspended, as Graham Allen was back in 2016. And we'll ask Andrew Dillon about that. This has been a very poorly handled story from the comms teams, both at the AFL and at Geelong. Now, I understand that's a secondary issue, Bruce, but when you see statement after media appearances, the penny finally starts to drop. Journalists are being briefed on Thursday evening this is going to go away and that nothing bad was done. Well, now we have a chairman apologising and an AFL investigation. And as I wrote in The Age today, the Geelong chairman, the current president, Grant McCabe, is also launching his own investigation into what board members knew and didn't know and why, and he couldn't answer this for me yesterday, why these documents weren't lodged to the AFL and why Steve Hocking, when first contacted by the Herald Sun about this story, denied it, according to the Herald Sun. And even Grant McCabe acknowledged that Steve Hocking's choice of words, as he struggled to recall he said the story, were poor.
And just before Andrew Dillon does join us, he's only seconds away, and the lines are open. After the Andrew Dillon interview, we want to take your calls on 133 693. Have we got clarity on whether Jake Kolodjashnij's manager at the time, Marty Pask, there's conflicting reports as to whether he was actually aware of this agreement being signed or not?
Geelong told me he was aware. Marty Pask has told the AFL Players Association, and this is important because he was an accredited player agent at the time, and this document was not lodged with the AFL or the PA. He says he was not aware.
And joining us on 3RW Football on this Saturday afternoon is the AFL Chief Executive, Andrew Dillon. Andrew, welcome to 3RW Footy.
Thanks for having me on, Bruce.
Geelong Chief Executive Steve Hocking described this story as a misstep. Some would describe it as a flagrant breach of AFL rules. How would you describe it?
Well, what we have done in relation to the issue at hand is issued a please explain to Geelong in relation to the agreement at hand, and I think Geelong have acknowledged that it should have been lodged, and then we'll work through that with them then, and I think the current president has done that also overnight.
So Andrew, this story broke late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, and the AFL were aware of it certainly earlier on Wednesday. Why did it take until Friday afternoon for you to issue a please explain? Because this statement on Thursday was pretty wishy-washy, to be blunt.
Why don't I start with, Caroline, that this is, and these are really complex issues facing the AFL and our clubs and our players, as well as sports globally. So it's not cut and dried, it's not open and shut. And so a really big focus.
Failing to lodge a document is cut and dried.
Yeah, but let me...
it's against AFL rules.
Let me go. So we were aware of the document late Tuesday, saw it Wednesday, and then working through that on Thursday. And so we spent the day, first of all, the first thing that we look at is the player. The player didn't want to be identified, so that we then were working with the Players Association about having a joint position, which we were able to do, and that took most of the day to do that. And we got that statement out, and we were really clear in that statement that the waiver was to be removed, and any agreement like that into the future wouldn't be approved. So I think we were actually really clear on that. Once we got that position done, then we went through yesterday, okay, what's the next move? And then that was issuing the please explain to Geelong, and that went out yesterday afternoon.
So we've read the statement earlier on the show from your chairman, Craig Drummond.
Yes.
There was an inference that perhaps you as an organisation were trying to protect your chairman by not issuing Geelong with a please explain.
I'm not sure where you see that inference, but what we did do was put the statement out on Thursday night, and as I said, we worked through yesterday, and the please explain was issued, and then Geelong will respond to that please explain.
Did the chairman, Craig Drummond, know that the document hadn't been lodged with the AFL? We know he knew about it and approved it, but did he know it hadn't been lodged?
Look, that question hasn't been asked. What we've gone to Geelong and asked them why it wasn't lodged. We'll get information back, but so that's something that we will hear from Geelong in relation to the non-lodgement of that agreement, which they have both Steve Hocking and the current president, Grant McCabe, have said it should have been.
What about Simon Kelleher, who was COO at the time and is now working for the AFL, managing player finances? Did Simon Kelleher know about this agreement? Have you asked him?
We haven't got to that stage yet. What we have done is gone to Geelong, and then once we get the information back from Geelong, then we'll talk to anyone who's relevant from there.
I would have imagined that would be one of the first people I'd be asking. He's now working for you in a crucial role.
No, I think what you would first do is actually deal with the club, and that's what we're doing. And Steve Hocking, who is the CEO of the club, and said he takes responsibility, and we will deal with Steve and the current club. And if it means that we have to speak to people who've previously been in positions at Geelong, will do that as well. But we'll do it in an orderly way. So
Steve, who is a former AFL head of football, has taken full responsibility for this in a late press conference yesterday. Back in 2016, the AFL suspended several officials from Greater Western Sydney, 2 officials, over an administrative error in removing of address and inferences about avoiding a drug test. I'm talking about Lockie Whitfield.
Right.
My memory is that Graham Allen was suspended for a year and heavily fined. Is there a chance that Steve Hocking could also face suspension?
Look, Caroline, I'm not going to get ahead of where the response from Geelong comes, but I think we're talking about 2 very different situations here.
I would say getting a player to sign a waiver to absolve himself of taking any legal action against a club for concussion. The biggest issue facing the game today is a pretty serious issue. Lockie Whitfield never actually avoided a drug test.
I didn't say it wasn't serious. What I said, they are 2 different issues, and they will be, as we do, you deal with issues on their merits.
Do you accept that and this has been written across all media in recent days, that there is a double standard when it comes to Geelong. I mean, I don't want to harp on Bailey Smith, but after that disgusting emoji he put out about me on Mad Monday, you were the first person to contact me. You were so distressed about that, and sympathetic and quite understanding and quite disgusted by what happened. And you contacted me in Europe. You were so concerned. And yet nobody contacted Geelong and issued them with a please explain until weeks later when there was another incident. Do you look back now and regret that?
Oh, look, on that particular one, I'm not saying I do or I don't, but I think on your first part, there aren't double standards. We treat each incident as they should be and as they come to us. And I think every now and again you do look back and you say, and you learn from, when you have done things and when you haven't done things, is what I'd say. So
double standards again, but the game has recently lost two highly decorated Indigenous players because of personal issues, one being Tyson Stengel, another Geelong player, and Bobby Hill, the Norm Smith medalist from Collingwood. Do you regret maybe you took the trouble to go and visit Bailey Smith and talk him through his issues? Do you regret not doing the same when their alarm bells started ringing with either Stengel or Hill?
What I'm hoping is that they aren't lost to the game. They have left their current clubs, but what I'm hoping for both Bobby and Tyson, and I think in their statements when they left the clubs, that there is hope that they, that there will be another opportunity for them. I think when you look back at it,
could you have intervened personally as you did with Bailey?
Oh, look, again, they're very different issues, and maybe I could have. Would I have had any impact? I don't know. Did I have any impact with Bailey? I don't know.
I want to play you an interview that we did on 3AW last night with the head of the PA, Players Association, James Gallagher.
Have you had conversations with his management group, the people there to represent him in these situations?
Yeah, been speaking to his management. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And they were comfortable with how this process played out?
As far as I'm aware, they weren't aware of it.
The managers were. His manager didn't know about this.
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Now, two senior Geelong people told me yesterday the manager was involved in all the conversations. We've spoken with Marty Pask, who was the manager at the time of Jake Kolodjashnij, and he knew about the contract, but he had no idea about this waiver. That surely is a red flag for the AFL.
Well, again, I've heard that just then. I do know that it was a process from the concussion panel to Jake coming back to training and then playing. That was a process that went over a number of months. I also know that he was represented by an independent advisor who advises on his insurance matters. So I do know that. I'm not sure in relation to, I haven't spoken to Marty Pask. I've spoken to his current manager, John Meeson, who has only taken over recently, and he wasn't aware of that, of where it was. And so that's that position. But they're the things that will come out on the back of the Please Explain.
Andrew Dillon, AFL Chief Executive, our special guest on 3AW Football on this Saturday afternoon. Andrew, should Craig Drummond stand aside as AFL Commission Chairman until this investigation is completed?
What we've got here is an issue that we're dealing with, and it is an issue at the moment that has been, it's at the AFL executive level. If it gets put up to the Commission, then it would be, and as has happened so far, Craig hasn't been involved in any deliberations or determinations, and obviously he won't be going forward. Is
there a scenario at the end of this investigation where his position is untenable?
Oh, look, that's not on any information that's in front of me at the moment.
So Andrew Newbold stepped aside, though, when he was implicated in the Hawthorn racism scandal. He stepped aside until he was cleared and was found to be cleared and is now back serving on the Commission. Is there a scenario where the chairman would step aside while this investigation is carried out? I mean, you've got a precedent there. I can't see why it wouldn't happen again.
Yeah, again, I don't want to get into the hypotheticals, Caroline, but what we have got at the moment is we're getting information from Geelong, and as that information comes to light, then we will deal with it that way.
I just put it to you that you've been poorly advised by your comms team on several occasions over this. I mean, all day Thursday, senior commentators were just calling for some sort of response from the AFL. Now, I understand it's complex, But to release a statement at the end of the day, and look, some of your advisors were telling my colleagues at The Age, and I can't speak for other organisations, that this was pretty much being overplayed and Geelong had done nothing wrong. Sometime on Friday afternoon it all changed. Do you regret now taking the advice of those people, or is it your responsibility?
I'm the CEO, I take the responsibility, and what I take responsibility for is making sure I work through all of the issues in a really complex manner that, and it shouldn't be lost on anyone, that involves really sensitive medical information of a player who didn't want that sensitive information released. So that's the number one thing that we're dealing with. The second one was working with the Players Association to make sure as an industry we can be aligned on an issue that is really important. It's like super important for the AFL and the clubs, but also the players and the Players Association. And that's actually an issue that's really important for sport, all contact sports within Australia and globally. So if it took us a little bit longer to get a statement out, well, then I'm happy to wear that. But I want to make sure that I finally get all the information that I've got before we do that.
I'll hand you over to Leigh Matthews.
Andrew,
Thanks,
just
Aaron.
one specific for me. How are you? I know there's a legals issues and the breach of AFL rules issue. I'm a bit in the ethical issue that also comes in a part of this. Do you know whose idea it was? Was it the player's idea to say, listen, if you let me keep playing, I'll sign this agreement? Or was it put to him by the club that to keep playing, you'll need to sign the agreement? I'm interested in the ethical answer to that. Do you know the answer yet?
No, I don't know that yet, Lee. But what I do know that this was an issue that was dealt with over a number of months, and there was numerous meetings with. There was the concussion panel, then there was club doctors, independent insurance advisors. There was obviously got to board level at Geelong and senior management at Geelong. So it was a process that took place over a number of months. But for your specific question there, I don't have that information.
Just one more from me. Just in terms of the sort of the transparency of it all, I guess, for the football public, do you think the agreement would ever be made public so people can read the words and make their own assessment of what it means, should mean? I mean, do you think that could ever happen?
Well, as I said before, Lee, what we're dealing with here is a player whose private medical information has been made public against his wishes, and he made that clear in his statement that he put out on, I think it was on Thursday night.
But thank heavens it was, Andrew, because if it hadn't been, this waiver would have existed, and you've already said that it's forced yourselves and the PA to get together and ensure it never happens again.
Look, absolutely, but I'm just talking about the individual player and the question that Leigh asked me. But I think what is also important is that you're dealing with a couple of different things here. You've got the release or the waiver, but also acknowledgement of risk, and making sure that players understand the risks, particularly when you've had a concussion, or in Jake's case, he'd had a couple of concussions, on the basis he gets cleared medically fit to play, just to make sure that he understands that there are risks involved with him continuing to play. So I think that part, there's no ethical issues there. You go to the release, and I think Craig's statement made it really clear today. At no stage did the release take away any of his statutory rights or the statutory obligations on the club, or the obligations on the club as an employer, where you have workplace health and safety obligations that you can't contract out of, and
but it was wrong. It was so wrong that you've removed it and you've said it will never happen again.
That's right, and it shouldn't have been there.
Well, further to that, are you confident there's no other secondary agreements, private contracts floating around in the competition across any other club, or have you launched an investigation to ascertain whether that is the case?
Bruce, as far as I'm aware, this is a unique and complex case, and there's no others like that.
Is there a timeline for the investigation?
We're waiting to hear back from Geelong. We've written to them yesterday afternoon, as you noted, and we'll hear back from them early in the week.
Okay, Andrew. Well, we thank you for your time today. So early in the week, we expect the Cats' response and then an AFL response to their response forthwith.
That's right, Bruce.
Andrew,
appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for your
having
time.
me on.
Thanks, Andrew.
Firstly, Caro and then Leigh, your reaction to that extended chat with the AFL boss.
Well, good on him for fronting up, Bruce, but I find it staggering that Andrew Dillon wouldn't have asked Simon Kelleher, his general manager of club finances, whether he was aware of this waiver and its non-lodgement with the AFL, given that Simon Kelleher was COO of Geelong at the time. I'm also amazed that he couldn't answer whether Craig Drummond was aware, the AFL chairman, former Geelong chairman, whether Craig Drummond was aware that the document hadn't been lodged with the AFL or the Players Association. I mean, that would have been pretty early questions, I would have thought, but...
He'd find Simon Kelleher about 3 offices down from his office, I would imagine.
Oh, it's extraordinary. But look, unfortunately, the AFL misread this. Geelong misread this. They thought they could get away with it. They haven't. This is now, as it should be, a serious investigation. I think the end has justified the means, Bruce, and the AFL is now taking it very seriously indeed. But as I say, I don't see how the chairman can act as AFL chairman while the investigation goes on.
I agree. Leigh?
A few things that just pop into my mind. I mean, we know that sort of the whole mental health issue is a no-go zone to talk about, right? But anything to do with the concussion, which is a really difficult issue that's surrounding the sport, that anything to do with players and their concussion issues, I think should be public. I don't think it should go under the umbrella of being like a health issue. Otherwise, you never get transparency, and we're still talking about an issue that we don't know the nuts and bolts of, the exact nuts and bolts of yet.
To your calls, 133 693, and we thank our callers for hanging on throughout that interview with the AFL Chief Executive Andrew Dillon. Ian has the new ball on this glorious Saturday afternoon at the MCG. G'day, Ian.
Yeah, good afternoon, Bruce. 2 points. I agree with Caro. The chairman needs to stand aside because of the optics. You know, AFL are always good about optics. So he needs to stand aside while the investigation goes on.
They used to be good at that. They're not good at it lately.
Secondly, Leigh is absolutely right. If Geelong has said to this player, you cannot play unless you sign this waiver, well, you know, Andrew Dillon is a lawyer and he must know what unconscionable conduct is, and that's the definition of it.
Yeah, I mean, whether the player introduced the conversation, Leigh or Geelong, the fact remains that Jake Kolodjashnij's career continued because he agreed to sign this waiver. And people at Geelong have said to me, but he wanted to play, so we did the right thing by him. We allowed him to play, and we couldn't have allowed him to play without this waiver. I don't believe that. Yeah, because even Andrew Dillon said the waiver didn't. You know, the waiver wasn't worth the paper it was written on anyway.
Well, it's not. I'm just talking about the ethics of it all, right? The ethics of it all. If the player said, "Listen, I desperately want to play, and if you let me play, I'll sign a waiver of some sort," I think that's different than the club putting it to him that this is part of the deal.
Ian, thanks for your call. Ed, welcome to 3AW Football.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just a couple of quick points. The complexity of the concussion issue, I think, is all clearly acknowledged. The one thing which is really interesting is that it's pretty clear that Geelong broke the rules that the AFL have put in place, and the inability for the AFL to acknowledge that the rules were clearly broken instead of hiding behind the complexity issue is beyond the pale for fans, I think. I mean, the organisation itself almost self-appoints themselves as the moral arbiters of society. Yeah, they're not prepared to be transparent or candid to the fans. And I think it'll be interesting to see what other people say, but it's almost like a protection racket where they treat us like mugs. And I feel like it's bordering on embarrassing, and I'm really interested to see what happens with respect to other clubs standing up and really pushing hard on this, because it goes to the very integrity of the game. And I feel for Kolodjashnij, because clearly he's got potentially some challenges. But I'm interested in your views about really taking accountability for this and being transparent with the people that pay the money to come along every week.
Well said, Ed.
Now, aren't they? Isn't that the reason, though, that they send the letter of, what's the letter say again? But basically, we needed an explanation now, and that is happening. And there'll probably be sanctions to come, I would think, definitely, wouldn't there?
Oh,
everyone believes
clearly.
that.
I mean, the view of all experts in the game is that what Geelong did was in contravention of the AFL rules. More sloppy paperwork at the very least from Geelong, and sloppiness doesn't really cut it this time, Bruce, as it did with the audit last year, which saw them fined a suspended amount of $70,000 and an actual amount of $35,000, I think it was.
I think we're all in furious agreement with you, Caro. Ed, thanks for your call. Vince, good afternoon to you.
Oh, good day, team. I just want to know, do you think that there's other teams involved? They'd be worried they don't have to take their Metamucil in the morning. They're so worried that they're going to get found out too.
Well, Vince, I posed that question to Andrew Dillon. I did want to follow up as to whether he didn't confirm whether an investigation's been launched around the rest of the league.
My understanding is that the AFL, and this was reported during the week, have been calling clubs ever since this story broke, or they learnt about this story, and asked if there were such contracts. We know there was an agreement with the Sydney Swans and a VFL player, but which, you know, could implicate Tom Harley, who's now also at the AFL, but it was CEO of Sydney at the time. But the Players Association have assured me that they were across that agreement and it involved the VFL, which wasn't subject to the CBA.
Luke, welcome to you.
How are we doing, everyone?
Good, thank you.
It's great to hear. So my query is just, what did the AFL actually know? It was reported initially that they were complicit with it, and then in their press statement, they said they had zero knowledge. However,
no, I
now
don't think that was reported initially. I think what was reported initially is that the Geelong hadn't lodged the paperwork with the AFL. Now, I think I heard or read, I think Jay Clark from the Herald Sun saying on Friday night or Saturday morning that he thinks there might have been people at the AFL who knew, but I'm wondering, is that Simon Kelleher, who I keep mentioning because he was at Geelong and he was at the AFL?
Well, they could have only known verbally because Geelong have admitted the paperwork wasn't lodged, so they could have only been told verbally maybe, a couple of years ago.
Yes, I mean, there was, the conspiracy theories on Thursday and Friday were like, has the AFL not acted on Geelong because they did know? But Andrew Dillon, I think Andrew Dillon has made mistakes in his tenure, but I think he's a very honest person. Now, I believe him that he did not know.
But the point you're making,
Karen,
the point you were making is that Craig Drummond, who now is at the AFL, and this Simon Keller, who's now at the AFL, they knew of it. So some people at the AFL knew of it. Simple. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Although, that's true, and they certainly didn't pass it on.
Luke, thanks for your call. Peter, good afternoon. Welcome to 3AW Footy.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on. 4 very quick points. First, to acknowledge Caroline Wilson's questions. They're amazing. The CEO was clearly on a back foot and stumbling over the motherhood statements, and it was very obviously well done, Caroline. Secondly, I think for a very long time this organisation, before Andrew Dillon, etc., has made many questionable decisions or the way they've treated process back from the Essendon days, and they're really displaying, with more of these to come up, they're really displaying some of the same values that we've criticised FIFA for over decades. And so is an external investigation on the entire organisation fit? And lastly, what I say in Geelong, does it open Geelong now to scrutiny about what else is in that drawer? Could there be something about the wages people keep bringing up over years? I think they've opened themselves up to a lot of other topics.
What's interesting, the AFL did a massive audit on Geelong last year. Now,
third-party agreements.
Yes. Now, it's just funny that this agreement, that was a different agreement, but they went through everything. I mean, I think, sponsors' laptops were removed. There was all sorts of stuff going on as they reached the final agreement. Now, they didn't know about the Jake Kolodjashnij agreement, so was it hidden? Did they not show them all the contracts? Did they not show them these waivers? It's sort of interesting. I mean, that was a thorough audit. Anyway, very good question. Appreciate your call.
Thanks for that, Peter. George, welcome to 3AW Footy.
Thanks, guys. I'm just coming from a different angle on this, in the fact that if I was to go and bungee jump, I would have to sign a waiver that I accept what should happen. Or in any other scenario, driving a car, a race car, it would be the same scenario. Even when you go to Luna Park, it would be the same thing. What I don't understand is if this player chooses to put his body on the line and play football, that's his choice, that's his body. The other thing with that is, how are we ever going to know whether the 2 concussions he's had would end his career and we would miss out on an amazing footballer?
But the player has to be protected from himself. And Geelong should have known better, and they should never have put him in this situation. They either let him play or they don't let him play. Don't make him sign a waiver that absolves him of any legal rights to take action against the club. It's just not only is it a terrible look, it looks almost immoral to me. I didn't like it at all, and I think in the end that's the bottom line.
And there seems to be uncertainty over how clear the clearance to play actually was. Surely it's either a red light or a green light.
Yeah, this highly complex business.
Yeah, it's either, and if you're medically cleared to play, then why does he need to sign a waiver?
Exactly, and everyone's acknowledging now that the waiver was wrong and not worth the paper it was written on, and so it was wrong on so many levels.